And I noted that most leaders today, an an MD alone is not enough. And I thought, geez, for an uncertain future, do I want to be a dean somewhere? Do I want to do something else? Do I want to, having another degree would be helpful. And so that was really the impetus to get it. And then after I did it, I was like, oh God, this would have been such amazing prep for years before. So I cannot, recommend more highly that if you are starting out and you want to be a leader, you need to have some formal leadership training. And an MBA is like the perfect thing to provide that for you.
Welcome to The Deep End, a plastic surgery podcast where we explore the people and ideas shaping the future of the field. Today, we're honored to be joined by Dr. Joseph Losee, a nationally recognized leader in pediatric plastic surgery and craniofacial surgery, education, and academic leadership. Dr. Losee serves as the Dr. Ross H. Musgrave Endowed Chair of Pediatric Plastic Surgery and Executive Vice Chair of the Department of Plastic Surgery at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. Since his arrival in 2003, he has led the Division of Pediatric Plastic Surgery as Chief at UPMC Children's Hospital, helping shape both the clinical and educational missions of the institution. A past president of numerous national societies, including the American Society of Plastic Surgeons and the American Society of Craniofacial Surgeons. He has authored more than 200 peer-reviewed articles, was the editor of landmark textbooks like Comprehensive Cleft Care, and served as a visiting professor at over 40 institutions worldwide. Join us as we dive into Dr. Losee's career of impact, his passion for education and wellness, and his vision for the future of pediatric plastic surgery. Let's dive in.
We are honored to be joined by Dr. Losee today. I'm Saeed Azoury, joined my co-host Hank Davis out of the University of Pennsylvania. And there are many reasons why I'm excited to have Dr. Losee on as a guest. Not only did a lot of our audience specifically request him, but he is somebody who's near and dear to Penn Plastic Surgery and comes to many of our events and is very close with our chief, Dr. Serletti, and is an inspiration to many of us, I know, on the audience, including myself. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
So one of the things that I feel like we don't get to talk about at conferences is your upbringing and what drove you to who you are today through your childhood. Did you have any interests outside of school, or what kind of crafted your love for medicine at the time?
Well, my background is very unconventional, let's say. So I grew up in upstate New York to a family of pretty humble means. My mom and dad got married. They had me and my sister. They got divorced and then remarried after my dad went to seminary. So I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian family. I wouldn't say pretty, I'd say very conservative. And so both of my parents were ministers. They then became missionaries. And I probably went to church, 7+ times a week. And I have no idea what got me interested in medicine. One fun thing my dad would do is, we grew up in a really small town too. So if the fire trucks or ambulance would go by, my dad would be like, come on, let's go. So we'd ride our bikes or drive around, and then kind of just watch. And I don't know if that got me interested in it or not, but I didn't think I was rich enough or smart enough to be a doctor. So, and I went to a small private Christian school that really, I have a made up diploma, but I don't really have a valid high school diploma. So I became an EMT and then a paramedic when you could do that without a college education. So I became a paramedic.
Why is that? You think it's because of your dad calling you to see all the ambulances that were running?
Yeah, I don't know. I really did have an interest in medicine. But like I said, didn't think I was rich enough or smart enough to do that. So I actually taught elementary math in this small private school. while I worked as a paramedic. And I did that. And it was the ER docs that were my guidance counselors or my mentors. And they were like, look, you ought to go to medical school, you know? And I like, I don't even have a high school diploma. And so I went to community college first, probably the only vice dean of a medical school that started out at a community college. And in fact, a funny story, when I was interviewing for a department chair once, I walked in and the guy interviewing me had my CV there. And I sat down. He was like, wow, not bad for starting out at a community college. I really wasn't sure if that was a compliment or what.
It's a backhanded compliment, but at least he reviewed your CV.
So I went to community college and basically finished what I should have done in high school and got an associate's degree. And it was a pretty rigorous community college it was a feeder program for RPI, Rochester Polytechnic Institute. And so it was a real science and engineering kind of associate's degree. And from there, I got into college. And from there, I worked, full time through college as a paramedic. They paid me really good money to study. And I ended up going to medical school in Rochester. So yeah, it's truly an unconventional path.
What were some of the other things you enjoyed doing besides school or work growing up?
Geez, I mean, I didn't have a typical kind of, how you talk to people and you say, okay, what was the best time of your life? Like high school, college, or medical school, right? And everybody, I love having that conversation at a dinner party because everybody's different. I really didn't have a high school. I just didn't have a high school experience. And then I worked full time all through college. So for me, medical school was sort of the time that I came out at the time. It was like medical school was incredibly formative. I met Joe Serletti early on in medical school. I met my now husband of 33 years in medical school. And it was certainly the most formative time for me.
Since it's such a formative time, obviously that's also when you decided surgery and then ultimately plastic surgery. But are there some key moments where you remember where you decided that you wanted to go down that path?
Yeah. So I thought I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. So it was the ER docs and the trauma docs that, were the ones who said, hey, you should go to medical school. I mean, at that point, I was teaching ACLS for Albany Medical College. And so it was the ER docs that were like, you need to go to medical school. It's funny, the medical students, they were like, ooh, you're a paramedic. And I was like, yeah, I want to go to medical school. And they'd be like, oh my God, don't go to medical school. The paramedic. But so I thought I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. I mean, that was it. So we had in University of Rochester, we had this program called Introduction to Doctoring. And it was basically a glorified, formalized shadowing program. And the trauma surgeons didn't participate in it because that's who I signed up to be with. So I got attached to a thoracic surgeon who was awesome. And he taught me how to scrub, and I just shadowed him like all the time. And we wandered into it. So he had a patient with a chronic empyema. And Joe Serletti was a new attending who came in and did a VRAM flap to fill this chronic empyema cavity. And so I was kind of like standing there like a puppy dog, and Joe came over and was like, what are you doing?
Was this the very first time you met him?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I said, I'm going to be a trauma surgeon. And he was like, what? He was like, what? Why do you want to do that? I was like, well, because blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, you ought to come and see what we do. And I thought, plastic surgery, my God, like, what is it? So I hung out with him then one day in the OR. And back then, this was 91. I mean, that's when, he would run 5 ORs at the same time and, do a free flap in one room, some abdominal reconstruction in another, a craniofacial case in another. And so he was doing a fronto-orbital advancement by himself with me.
You were a medical student.
Yeah, just kind of scrubbed in, standing there. And of course, somebody called him to go into another room, so he was like, okay, hang out here. And he left. I was there, looking at the kid's brain. It's just like, this is because I taught school. So I knew I liked kids. I wanted to do something with kids, but I like surgery. And the light switch just went off. And I was like, oh my God, like this is what I've got to do. So I, ultimately went into plastic surgery. I didn't like hand surgery. I didn't like breast surgery. I didn't like microsurgery. I wanted to do craniofacial surgery. And it was all really because of that. So there are certain moments in your life, your driver's license, or you get into medical school. That was one of those defining moments that just by chance, I was scrubbing with some thoracic surgeon who needed a plastic surgeon's help. And it forever changed the course of my life. Just that one freak chance kind of encounter.
We hear these stories over and over when interviewing people like you, that there's just this one person or this one day that just, Jim Higgins was talking about how he was in college and he was just walking by tent setup for medical school. And it was because he just happened to be walking by that tent. That's what sparked his interest in medicine. And so Serletti kind of taking you under his wing that day, it's so impressionable. It's so magnificent in a way how something like that can change your life forever. You probably know this, but he is so incredibly proud of you from the perspective of a mentor and close friend. And I think you come up in conversation. We celebrated the 20 years of Penn Plastic Surgery with him being chief, and he mentioned you. So what are your thoughts of him as a leader, mentor from those early experiences with him?
Yeah. Before I'll mention one thing, you brought up Jim Higgins. So Jim was one of my co-fellows, co-residents, as was Steve Moran. And Jim Higgins was going into family medicine until he met Joe. Same kind of experience. I don't know the exact details of what his experience was, but I do know he was going into family medicine. So I started hanging out in plastic surgery, and then Joe had this bright idea of wanting to write up this. I guess he had done 2 or 3 VRAMs for chronic empyemas, so he was going to write it up. So again, this is 1991, and we were there on a Saturday morning in his office using the secretary's typewriter, right, to type. So he's sitting there pecking out like this, and my job was to get the coffee. And I was like, hey, I can actually type. I know how to type. You want me to type this? Like, you can just dictate. And it was like, no. So sat there for hours, and he like pecked out on a typewriter this thing. And the review came back like, these 7 authors submit 3 cases of blah, 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 and it was flatly rejected. Funny thing, though, it then got accepted into the flagship thoracic journal because it was something novel to them. So Joe was just a busy young surgeon, and we got to be fast friends, and he really promoted and supported me in every way for all those years.
Yeah. Well, he tells this story of how when you left after you were done with all of your training, he had to make himself happy again. So he bought a nice new car.
Yeah. Yeah. His wife. So we really did become really close friends. And Franklin and I would have dinner with Joe and Bonnie and the girls twice a week, like every Sunday night and many times throughout the week. And when Bonnie was on call at night, he and I would hang out, and oh God, so many stories. Bonnie, when I did come to Pitt, we were both very sad. That was really the one thing I missed. And Bonnie was like, well, think of all the money you're going to save that you guys go out and spend, spend so much money.
And with that money, he bought a new car.
Yeah.
But fast forward a little bit to your time at Pitt. You were program director for over a decade with a program that has such a storied legacy. And, one thing that was so impressionable upon me when I was interviewing there is, all the leaders on the wall. And of course, you were program director for such a long time. You spearheaded the competency training. What are you most proud of during that time? And kind of as a segue of the competency training, do you think that's the path to the future?
Yeah. So when I came here, I asked to be the associate program director, which that was back in the days when most chiefs, there were really very few departments of plastic surgery, and most of the division chiefs were the program directors, unless there was a really big program, and then they often had a separate program director.
So was that part of your negotiation, or is it once you got there?
Well, so, and I don't even know if there were very many associate program directors back then. You know, the ACGME as we know it was just established in 2000. It had been around in various forms and shapes and stuff, but the ACGME that we all know today really landed in 2000. And I came here in 2003. And that was really before, you know, duty hours were set or competencies. All of that stuff was just either had just started or was starting at the time. And so I wanted to be the associate program director. Well, so I got here 6 months later, the program director went on sabbatical. And so Andy Lee, who was the chief at that point, who hired me, who then went on to be the department chair at Hopkins and now the dean and provost at UT Southwestern, Andy was like, well, I guess you're the program director. And I can remember the executive director for the plastic surgery review committee calling me. It was a Sunday morning. I know where I was in my house. And because Joe and I had dealt with her, Doris Stoll was her name. She was an OR nurse here at Pitt. She was Tom Starzl's OR nurse for a while.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she went off, got her PhD, and then started working for the ACGME. Anyway, she called me and was like, that program is going on probation. So-and-so is running out of their back pocket for so long. We're going to, that program's at risk for being shut down. And because Pitt, when I applied, it was one of the top programs. When I applied, I didn't even get an interview here. But then it kind of went through a lull. And then Andy Lee came. And so anyway, I took over the program and worked my butt off. We had a site visit within a year, and we passed the site visit with a commendation. And things really have been the best part of my career. I'm sure I'll look back on as being the program director. It was my identity, both locally and then nationally. So I'm really proud of that. And the competency thing is another time variable competency-based training. Yeah, we were the first in the country to have that program. Been successful. We've graduated someone early. And now in Canada and the US is really focused on, I'm not sure it's going to, the time variable component is going to, where that's going to be. I'm still a very strong proponent of that, but the competency-based training certainly is the wave of the future. I think everybody recognizes that that's going to happen, but whether or not it's time variable, it's a logistical nightmare, but I still am a firm believer in it.
Yeah. Part of me, when you talk about logistical nightmare, I think to myself about our residency cohort, if somebody were to leave early, then what happens? But if that's the way for the future, we have to just figure it out and make up for the resident who is able to graduate early, I guess.
It was easy for us because we went through a phase of mandatory year in the lab. It's always, Pitt is a huge research place. So we went through a phase of requiring all residents to go into the lab, and then it was optional. And because of that, our complement is always off. So one year we'll graduate 8 chiefs. The next year we'll graduate 3. And for us, having an uneven complement, we've adjusted to it. We've learned to survive or to thrive that way. So if somebody leaves early, like no big deal for us.
Yeah. It's funny when you bring up that you would love to be program director. I think about it. I'm the associate PD and I love what I do, but I think if you ask a lot of the program directors, they'll say it's a thankless job for some of them, but there are that group of program directors that absolutely love it. I'm one who loves what I do, love being there for the residents and advancing education as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you I think a sad story. But when I was a program director, I was at the association and the phone rang. It was after, we were all out, hanging out and stuff. My phone rang and I stepped aside and it was one of our residents who called me. And it wasn't a problem. They called because something happened. Either they I don't know, they had a kid or I don't know, they got engaged or something, and they called to tell me about it. And I went back to the group and a program director was like, what was that? I was like, oh, one of my residents called me. And he said to me, you mean they just call you at any time when they want to? And I looked at him and I was like, well, of course they do. I mean, it's not a thankless job. I think if you do it well, it's not a thankless job. You're there to experience 30 some folks in some of the most challenging, difficult, hardest periods of their life where all kinds of life happens. People get married, family members die. They get divorced. They have, miscarriages. They get sick. I've been in the ER with more than one resident, and you're their den mother. I mean, you're their person during that period of time. And if you do the job well, then you are that person, and that's who they want to call. And that's what makes it meaningful. I'll never forget that when I gave up being the program director, so Vu Nguyen, who was my associate program director for 8 years, was being recruited away to UT Southwestern to be their program director. I decided to step aside. It was really tough, but life worked out. It all worked out really well. But that Monday, one of our residents, her dad died, and she called Vu. And Vu called me Monday morning and said, hey, so-and-so's dad died, and I let her go home, obviously. And it was like somebody sucker punched me. I just was like that, oh my God, like I'm not the person anymore. Like she didn't call. It was really, it was tough. So I don't think it's a thankless job. I think if you do it well, it's an incredibly rewarding job.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because I had to call my program director in general surgery residency to tell her that my dad died, and somebody who I was very close with. And Pam Lipset at Hopkins was the best program director ever. Like she knew when to be serious. She knew when to have just the biggest heart. She would fight for us with other services if she had to. I guess going a little bit off script, do you ever find yourself like thinking to yourself, I'm the program director, I have to be professional, like I can't get too close with residents and, be emotional in bad times or be there for them in good times like weddings, et cetera. Like, did you ever find yourself thinking to yourself, as a program director, there's this fine line between being professional or being very close with residents?
I think it's the same questions that people bring up with patients. Oh, do you give patients your cell phone? Oh, do you feel do you have to be standoff? And for both the residents and patients, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but if you want to find meaning in what you do, you have to be vulnerable and allow for that. So my answer is no. I became very personally involved in many, many, many of our residents' lives, just like my patients. And that's the thing that gives you meaning, right? The most important thing in life is relationships. And it depends on how much meaning you want out of the relationship with your patients and with your residents. We would have them over to our house all the time and for holidays. And so the deeper the relationship, the more personal the relationship, the more meaning you find with patients and with certainly with our trainees.
I would imagine a lot of this came from the way Dr. Serletti treated you as a leader and a mentor. I can't say the amount of times we interviewed people on this podcast who he took them under their wing. He brought them into plastic surgery. He mentored them. And then they went out and became leaders and program directors and chairs. And they kind of, paying it forward.
No, I think you're right. I think that's probably where it all came from. You do run the risk because I know he and I have both been accused of having favorites, but I don't think mentorship can be arranged. It's not an arranged marriage. It's a lot like a marriage. You both have to put a lot of effort and energy in it for it to work. But you can't arrange those things. Those things they happen for whatever reason. And we've tried that before to have a mentoring program. So new interns get a mentor. It's failed every single time we've tried. Doesn't work because it's a relationship. You can't force a relationship.
You can't force it.
Yeah.
Yeah. To fast forward a little bit, and I'm not going to name all of the societies that you were president of because I'm going to forget one and then I'm going to feel bad, but I'll name a few. So as past president of ASPS, American Council of Academic Plastic Surgeons, Society of Craniofacial Surgeons, and the list goes on and on and on. What advice do you have for people who want greater societal involvement and perhaps even leadership roles in societies? Like, is that something where you told yourself one day, or you told somebody, hey, I want to be a leader in these societies? How did it all come about, or what advice do you have for others?
Two things. So one is it just doesn't happen. Dreams don't come true. Plans do. I remember.
I love that. Where'd you get that one from?
That was a lecture that Mike Longacre gave, 30 years ago for me. I don't even remember where or when I was, but he was giving a talk, and dreams don't come true. Plans do. So couple of things. One, you have to have many irons in the fire for one option to pan out. It's my advice, which is advice that people have. I saw a podcast from ASPS, the title was Learning to Say No as a Prevention for Burnout. And I was like, that is the most stupid podcast. Sure, I say no, and then you'll never be burned out. And you won't find any satisfaction work either. But my advice always has been to starting out, when someone's starting out, is to say yes to everything. Hey, do you want to be on this committee? Yes. Do you want to be on that committee? Yes. Will you be on this task force? Yes. You've got to say yes to a lot of things, because if you don't, not every committee you'll work on, you'll end up being the committee chair. And so you got to have a lot of irons in the fire. So one or two pan out at the end and meaningful, and so you pick the things that you want to, and then you get involved as much as you can. And then you'll go from that committee to the committee chair. And then, they always ask that it's odd. You ask and then when you're in the position of trying to, fill up a committee, who do you ask? You ask the person that's the busiest, because they'll get something done. And the moment you start saying no, I've seen it happen. You'll be in a committee and somebody will be like, hey, we need somebody to chair this thing here. What about so-and-so? And then somebody will say, yeah, I've asked them before and they've said no. Passed right over to the next person. What about asking this person? Well, they're really busy. Good. That's the person we want. And so if you want to be a leader in a society, then you've got to pay your dues. You got to spend time and energy. And you know what? It costs. It costs a lot. People complain, oh, well, they never asked me to be, in a leadership position. And I want to say, well, what have you done to deserve even being asked? So being a leader in those societies costs. It costs time. It costs money. Time is the big thing. When I was president of ASPS, it was like, they do give you a stipend because they expect you to at least consider it a 50% effort.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, so at least 20 or 30 hours a week, you dedicate.
Oh, wow.
And you're away a lot. Now, granted, my year, it was in a room it was on my third floor because it was a COVID year. So I didn't travel, because you usually are on the road 3 or 4 months out of the year. But it was, and the committee, and all of the time that you spend in committees, and it's almost every night there was something. So it cost a lot to me and to Franklin and our son Hudson. It cost a lot. So leadership has a cost. It's immensely rewarding. And yeah, being president of ASPS was a really cool experience, but it took a toll, and it came with a cost.
You're not the first person to say a task to somebody who's busy. And I love that. It's so true.
Yeah. So my advice is to say yes, get involved with as many things as you can early on. And then you'll figure out what you like and what you want to spend your time on. And then you'll be asked to do more.
Yeah, so you're not of the mindset of early into practice, narrow things down to 1 or 2 conferences, 1 or 2 societies, and then focus on those, kind of keeping it broad, seeing what you like, trying to be as involved as possible.
Well, yes and no. So I didn't get involved in the Micro Society or the Breast Society or any of the hand societies. Yeah. All of the other ones I tried to get involved in as much as ASPS, the association, ACAPS, for sure. Those kinds of things. That was my interest. So I guess, yes, you've got to stick with your.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. You talked about this a little bit earlier, but you're the recipient of the prestigious National Goldwyn Mentor of the Year award by, I think they call it, do they pronounce it ACEPS now? ACEPS? I don't, what is it?
It's gone through 3 name changes since
I
I've
think
been
it's ACEPS.
ACEPS now.
Yeah. So from the perspective of somebody who won the award from the National Society on Education, what do you think makes for a good mentor, strong mentor-mentee relationship? You talked about it. It can't be like prefabricated. It can't be, mandatory or pre-assigned. So what else makes for a good mentor-mentee relationship?
Well, I think that award I got just from my years as being the program director and grateful residents who still now, years later, meaningful happens to them, and I'll get a text out of the blue from so and so who just became the division chief or the program director, and letting texting to let me know. I mean, that's incredible. It's just speaks to the what provides you meaning in your career. So I think that's probably they were my past residents were the ones that nominated me for that. But there have been, like, there's one person, it was not my program. I mean, they just reached out to me from a school that didn't have a plastic surgery program.
Mm-hmm.
And with the request, would you be my mentor? And I was like, sure. So we met online and hit it off. And, every year now, the guy is in practice, fellowship trained, and he still calls. Every 6 months we get on the phone, and now on Zoom, and he catches me up on his life and what's happened, and asks me questions, and it's been really enjoyable. And I'm not even sure I've ever met him in person, except
wow,
meeting a couple of times. But it's so it can look at different ways. Like you don't, yeah.
Well, hopefully he's a real person. And not you went on to get your MBA. And a few of the people who we've interviewed got their MBAs. Is that something that you felt would provide you with the necessary tools to do what you were already doing, or do you think that was something more so kind of a path to greater leadership?
Yes. I'll answer both questions with a yes. I regret not doing it sooner because
how soon would you say?
Well, that's kind of, certainly before I became, I mean, 3 years in practice while I was in Rochester. I started there, from 2000 to 2003, and then was recruited here at Pitt. I wasn't there. It's another long story. I wasn't their first choice to be the division chief here. I was supposed to be recruited with someone else, and that person backed out last minute. And so it was a long story, but I was questioning whether or not I should come here. Certainly, Joe didn't really particularly want me to leave Rochester. And so he called and talked to Andy Lee and was like, Andy, unless you make him the division chief, I'm going to do everything in my power to keep him here. And Andy had a change in heart because he knew people. And anyway, as it turned out, I ended up being the division chief at Children's and took over a program that was really in distress. It would have been nice at that point to have had some formal leadership training, because an MBA is more than just learning how to read spreadsheets, right? I mean, it's a leadership training course. It's more than just business. And the problem that we do in academic medicine, and you see it all the time, is just what happened to me. I was hired to be a division chief with zero training. I had no leadership training, no business training, no HR training. And I had a hard time, early on figuring all those things out. And they hire department chairs like that. They hire people for their IQ and not their EQ. And they get fired often. They fail because they have no formal leadership training. So before you take a leadership position, it would be great to, it would have been great for me to have my MBA. But the reason why I got it so late, Peter Rubin, who's my chief, took it, and then Franklin, my husband, took it, and I just watched them go through it and enjoy it so much.
You felt left out.
Well, so then I was in a role where I was participating in the recruitment of a lot of department chairs in my role as an associate dean for faculty affairs at the time. And I noted that most leaders today, an MBA is not enough. Leaders in academic medicine, an an MD alone is not enough. And I thought, geez, for an uncertain future, do I want to be a dean somewhere? Do I want to do something else? Do I want to, having another degree would be helpful. And so that was really the impetus to get it. And then after I did it, I was like, oh God, this would have been such amazing prep for years before. I cannot, recommend more highly that if you are starting out and you're interested in a leadership role and you want to be a leader, you need to have some formal leadership training. And an MBA, I think, is like the perfect thing for you.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect segue to talk about your role as Vice Dean for Faculty Affairs and Co-Chair of UPMC Health System Physician Wellbeing. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that entails?
Yeah. So at the time that I stepped down from being the program director, there was an opportunity that I was asked to look at to be an advisory dean. It's like an assistant dean of students. So we have 700 medical students, and there's a dean of students, and then there are 7 advisory deans or assistant deans of students, where you have 100 medical students. You follow them about 25 a year all through. And it's like being their program director. They're a primary dean for their 4 years of medical school. Same thing. You get them you get them acclimated to medical school, help them figure out what specialty they want to do. You get them through 3rd year, and then you get them into a residency program. You're their primary dean for all kinds of things that happen. Again, a very meaningful role if you embrace it that way. And I really liked working in the dean's office a lot. I exchanged 30 residents for 100 medical students, and I've really enjoyed it. And then there was an opportunity to be the associate dean for faculty affairs. We have 5,000 faculty. It's a huge place here. 2,700 paid faculty, about 2,300 volunteer faculty. And then our new dean changed the structure, and I ended up becoming the vice dean. And I spend about 90% of my effort here in the office. I still see cleft patients on Monday mornings, and I can do a case on Tuesday and or Thursday mornings, usually just one cleft case. So I still get to do the 2 or 3 operations I love the most. I get to do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really think about it. If you could pick, it wouldn't be great for everybody because some people like doing head to toe stuff. But if you're a super subspecialist and you'd prefer to just do 1 or 2 things, and getting allowed to do just that, it's a real pleasure. And we do all things. Our Office of Faculty Affairs, if you think of faculty affairs, it's really recruitment and diversity. It's appointments and promotions, it's well-being and burnout, it's career development and professional development, and then investigations and remediation, and helping those that are struggling. So I enjoy what I do.
Yeah, and it's nice how things have worked out in such that, like, you're stepping down from one role to assume another role. It's always nice, and kind of goes back to your point where if you work hard and you say yes to a lot of stuff, you will be that person who, when it's time to step down from a certain role, they'll be looking for you to fill another bigger role.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's about creating a reputation for saying yes.
Yeah. Thinking back to everything we just talked about, from your high school experience to going to college, paramedics, to going from trauma to plastic surgery, program director, dean, is there anything looking back that you would say to yourself, man, this is my one big regret, or potentially this is the thing that I would change?
I probably would have done more basic science research, I think, gotten more involved, although I don't know. It's a great question. Obviously, I did a lot of research, even some basic science and translational research. It's the weakest part of my portfolio, my academic portfolio. It was the thing that I don't do a ton of it. I do, I get involved with some clinical research now, but again, wanting to be a division chief or a department chair or something, you have to appreciate the incredible importance of research. And that's how medical schools, well, at least until recently, that's how medical schools were funded, is by the indirects from research. And it still is. It's just not as much as it's going to be less moving forward, which has put research intensive medical schools back on their heels right now. But it's really important. And so I probably would have engaged more in that, because that really is the currency of academic medical schools, is hardcore research. And it would have probably helped me out more, along the way.
It's funny you say that, but you're in a dean position, so it's like, how more help can you get?
I just think it might have made it a bit easier for me along the way.
Yeah. No, I understand. Now we're kind of getting to a few of our fun last questions. I'll ask the first couple just because these are ones that particularly interest me. But how much sleep do you get? And how do you make time for, obviously, your family, Franklin, your hobbies? I'm always curious about people and their sleep cycle and fitness, etc.
Yeah, I get about 7 hours of sleep each night. I go to bed early. I go to bed around 9:30. Now, this is if I'm not traveling or whatever. I mean, at home, regular life, I go to bed at 9:30, get up at 4:30, have coffee and check the hate mail. And then I squeeze in 30 minutes of some kind of exercise. And then, then off to clinic or the OR or to the medical school.
So like 6-ish hours of sleep. 6, 7.
6 to 7. 7 ideal. 9:30 to 4:30.
Do you have to set your alarm at 4:30, or do you just wake up?
I set my alarm every night, but a lot of times, like this morning, I woke up on my own.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we love hearing that. Everybody's routine. Okay, so we asked this to everyone as well. What's your favorite surgical instrument?
A dental curette. It's basically a small periosteal elevator.
Wow,
it's funny. I actually have to go to the dentist tomorrow for teeth cleaning, so that's like the first thing that comes to mind.
And then also, do you listen to music in the OR? And if you do, what do you like to listen to?
I'll listen to anything other than country music.
Yeah, I guess maybe you let people choose, and then if you don't like it, then you'll choose.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember in the OR with Joe Serletti when I was a resident at this time, and he would be hanging out with a friend of his. We would go to this community hospital to do pre-flaps, and there was an anesthesiologist who he went to medical school with. And so we would blast like classic rock, Earth, Wind and Fire, that kind of stuff, so loud that people would come in and complain like from other ORs and ask to have it turned down. So I like any of that. Frank Sinatra, classics, all of those things.
And then for me, every time I put on a bow tie, I have to watch a YouTube video. And it takes me anywhere from 7 minutes to 15 minutes to get a bow tie. I'm not kidding. Is it?
But I forget, one of our cardiologists that always wore a bow tie as well. And I think I asked him that one time and he said, do you want your doctor clipping on his bow tie, or do you want your doctor to know how to tie a bow tie? And ever since then, I was like, I better only wear one if I know how to tie.
Is there ever an occasion where you're like, today's a tie day?
Historically, in the last 5 years or almost 10 years, it's all bow ties.
Well, if you could teach me like a few pearls just to speed up a little bit every time I have to wear one, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, next time we're together, I will,
at the association association's a big event for that. Yep. Well, thanks so much for joining us. This was probably my favorite podcast, and it's so nice to hear from leaders like you that teach us life lessons that help us. And we're a little bit selfish by being the first ones to be able to listen to this, but I'm sure our audience is going to appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you for listening to The Deep End, a plastic surgery podcast. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and leave a rating on Apple Music or Spotify. Video from the podcast is available on Instagram and YouTube at the Deep End Podcast. Join us again soon for more conversations with luminaries and experts in the world of surgery.